Welcome, and thank you for being with us today. I'm Amjad Ahmed, and I'm Director and Senior Resident Fellow of Empower Middle East, our new initiative at the Atlantic Council's Rafiq Hariri Center, focused on shaping solutions to drive economic and human prosperity in the Middle East. We are honored to be hosting Qatar Development Bank CEO, Abdulaziz bin Nasser Al Khalifa, for a conversation about what Qatar is doing to promote entrepreneurship and to drive economic diversification and growth. I've had the privilege of investing and operating in Qatar for several years in several sectors, including education, food and beverage, and e-commerce, and have witnessed significant growth in the country's economy during the past 2 decades. However, it faces considerable challenges today due to several factors, including the blockade and the COVID pandemic. As the country looks to stabilize during the global health crisis and continues its path forward, we couldn't have a better person to discuss these issues and these challenges and opportunities ahead. As I mentioned, Abdulaziz is CEO of Qatar Development Bank with a capital base of 12 billion Qatari riyals, or $3.3 billion. He has been at the forefront of critical economic initiatives, including the pandemic stimulus, funding for entrepreneurship, and diversification of the Qatari economy. In addition to his role as CEO of QDB, he is the chairman of Elan, the chairman of the Qatar Business Incubator Center, and the chairman of Bidaya Center of Entrepreneurship and Career Development. He has played a key role in launching several flagship development initiatives, including Al-Damin Partial Guarantee Program, Tasdeer Qatar Export Development Agency, and the Housing Loan Program for Qatari citizens. I will kick off our conversation with several questions, but please feel free to participate in the discussion by typing your questions in the Q&A box located in your control panel. Abdulaziz, welcome to the Atlantic Council, and thank you for being with us today. I wanted to start by giving you an opportunity to lay the landscape today of Qatar and where you are in terms of economy, and tell us a little bit more about your role at QDB and the type of programs that you're focused
on. First of all, thank you, Amjad, for hosting me with the Atlantic Council. I'm privileged to be here today to talk to you about what we do at Qatar Development Bank and how we're supporting entrepreneurship and small and medium enterprises. As you have rightfully mentioned, the Qatar Development Bank is a state-owned development bank responsible to support small and medium enterprises and to ensure that we provide accessibility to different and various support elements and tools. The bank was established back in 1997 as a tool within the government hand to ensure accessibility for the private sector to financing at that time, which have evolved with the Qatar economy evolvement and reached into solving different multiple issues. First element is accessibility to information and training, where we provide a lot of training for small and medium enterprises, for entrepreneurs, that goes into the incubation centers, that goes into going hand in hand with the universities and the educational system and the academia, where we train entrepreneurs and startups on how to tackle issues and how to solve issues through the private sector. Having said that, that entails also our Qatar Business Incubation Center, which is one of the largest incubation centers in the Middle East, which I'm privileged to chair, and it's owned by Qatar Development Bank, where we handhold entrepreneurs and startups during their journey, especially on making sure that their ideas could be converted into projects that could add value to the local economy. We also provide a lot of detailed and custom-made training for startups and entrepreneurs. And that type of training goes into the likes of how to convert an idea into a project, how to tackle marketing, how to tackle COVID, which is one of the biggest issues that they're currently facing, how to handle human resources. At the same time, we work hand in hand with an organization called Injaz Al-Alam. And over there, we go into schools, we go into mid-school and high school to actually plant the seed within the students that they don't have to graduate to become a government employee. that they could actually start their own projects and become an entrepreneur. Of course, that has a cultural element into it also. So this first challenge of accessibility to information and training. And by accessibility to information, we do a lot of market analysis, where we provide information to the local market and to the startups on different sectors. I think one of our recent projects were around domestic waste and how to convert domestic waste into valuable products through waste recycling and becoming more environmental friendly. The second challenge that we're actually solving for the private sector or the SMEs is accessibility to financing. And by accessibility to financing, we solve that through direct lending. And we do direct lending through our, because we're a bank, so we provide direct debt. Our debt portfolio currently is around 9 billion Qatari riyals. And we provide subsidized lending to important sectors, the likes of agricultural, fishery, livestock. And you would imagine that post-blockade, this also played a big role into Qatar resilience to ensure that we have local production and capitalizing and utilization of technology to be able to produce such products locally. So providing accessibility to financing through debt instruments and also through partial guarantees, where we engage with the local banks that they could provide funding through them, and we guarantee the exposure of the entrepreneurs with the partner banks. The portfolio around there is 1 to 1.2 billion Qatari riyals. Then we also provide accessibility to finance through a VC vehicle, where we invest with entrepreneurs through a pre-seed, seed, Series A investment vehicles, where we provide them with funding to ensure that they could actually pass the value of debt, and when they could actually safely be able to launch their projects. The focus there is mainly on technology-related startups and ventures. We work a lot with Qatar Foundation and Qatar Science and Technology Park. We work with funds, international funds, to match their funding once they come and sit up here in Doha, to ensure that they're helping also the ecosystem to exist and flourish. And I think one of the biggest issues that we face in the Middle East is actually the accessibility to funding through equity, through VCs and PEs, which is a market that's very heavily underserved in the Middle East, and that's hindering the ecosystem development itself. At the same time, from accessibility to funding perspective, we provide an ECA model, an export credit agency model, where we ensure the exports of Qatari goods and products to the international market, and by that we're providing an advantage to the local made products to be able to export to international markets. So the first challenge was accessibility to information and training. Second challenge is accessibility to finance. The third challenge that we're supporting into is basically accessibility to markets. And by markets here, we mean the local markets and the international markets. The local market, by playing a vital role with the government. As you know, this is a government-led type of an economy, which is most of GCC economies. And the government is the largest procurer of services and goods. So by going hand in hand with the government and work and bridging the gap between the private sector, the startups, and the government procurement system, we ensure that the SMEs and startups becomes the premier provider of services and goods to the government. We've seen this very evidently post the blockade, actually. When the blockade happened, the local SMEs and the local private sector became, they geared up, be it production capacities, be it providing services on spot, be it new plants that actually started in Qatar to be able to support the projects locally and support the local economy. And we played a role specifically post-blockade by creating some sort of a situation room where we help SMEs and startups by identifying the gaps for them so that they could actually invest into those gaps and convert them into opportunities, by matching them with the government procurement system, and by giving them priority to provide such products and such services. We provide a lot of guarantees to the local SMEs and startups, and we've played a policy advocacy role in terms of the government procurement policy by exempting small and medium enterprises from bid bonds, performance bonds, and advanced payment guarantees. which enables them to access government procurement opportunities. International markets, we manage the TPO and the ECA, the Trade Promotion Organization, and that basically by matching the local exporters with the international importers. We have a focus on markets, and that focus in markets basically starts from analyzing what we produce locally in Qatar, from products basically, manufactured goods, and then matching that with what other nations are importing. So we every year we conduct such surveys to understand where does our products stand, the local private sector products stand, versus what the international market is importing, and then how can we ensure that there is accessibility for the local private sector and the SMEs to those international markets. Same thing goes with services. How can we help startups and SMEs within services to be able to export the services in the four modes of be it a service that they actually reside here in Doha and provide a service to someone in Kuwait, Oman, or wherever, or that actually by branching out to international markets, and we build on the strength of our national champions. So with this economy, Amjad, and I'm sure you know this and others, when the economy got built and most massively actually in the last 20 years. I mean, if you take a look at our economy, it kind of quadrupled in terms of size in the last 20 years. It was less than 200 billion Qatari riyals in terms of size, 2003, 2002, and then 2019 we're north of 800 billion Qatari riyal. So that growth, of course, have also yielded good results for Qatar by an amazing infrastructure. Great airport, one of the best hubs in terms of ports, great infrastructure, which enabled also the existence of national champions, the likes of Ooredoo, which is one of the pioneering when it comes of adopting of 5G, the likes of Qatar National Bank, one of the biggest and strongest banks in the region and globally, Qatar Airways, which I'm sure that you know and others who are on the webinar knows very well. And those national champions, they play an anchoring role where small and medium enterprises also exist there, and there is a backward forward relationship. The strength is how to actually convert that relationship and how to ensure that we can grow the value chain. And by growing the value chain, we create those clusters of small and medium enterprises that then could actually export those services internationally. So to go back into the theme or the approaches, this accessibility to markets plays a role. It's a challenge. It's still a challenge for small and medium enterprises. And what we try to do through playing that role is by providing the platform locally, domestically, and opening those markets for them, and internationally by actually tapping into those national champions, value chains, and also matchmaking to reduce the risk on those small and medium enterprises and those startups. So accessibility to information and training, accessibility to finance, accessibility to markets, and we play a policy advocacy role. Every 6 months, we conduct workshops with almost all the startups and SMEs in Qatar. Now it's a virtual format, like this format, where we hear them out, we list down the issues that they're facing, we convert those into thematic approaches, where we play a policy advocacy role with the government to understand where the red tapes are and how can we help them to gain accessibility to support from the government and to play a leading role into creating a real diversified economy.
I want to mention the last pillar you mentioned, which is the accessibility to markets, because this relates very much to the blockade. And in my experience in investing in Qatar, is that, and vice versa, investing in companies in whether it's the UAE or Saudi or Egypt, regional accessibility is important, and adjacent markets are the easiest place to expand. You were put in a very unique position where markets closed overnight. Where have you found success in terms of expanding these markets? So what countries now can startups based out of Qatar operate in more freely? And which, I guess, countries have you grown since the blockade to make up for that loss?
So, Amjad, I think for me personally, if you ask me, it's been it was a blessing and a curse in a way, or because basically what doesn't kill you make you stronger. And what have happened basically is that the private sector found that there are gaps that they have to fill, and they've been doing amazingly in terms of filling those voids and those gaps. Now, the globe is not only those four countries. So, and within, as I've just mentioned, we have an amazing infrastructure. The Qatar Airways and the airport and Hamad Port, and almost within 6 to 7 hours of reach from us, there is north of 500 million population that we could serve from Qatar. And this goes into the amazing work that Qatar Financial Center and our investment promotion agency has been doing, where just recently, actually, we launched our Qatar FinTech Hub. And that's a testimony to, when we launched Qatar FinTech Hub, and that was like 2 months ago, 1 month and a half ago, we received more than 750 applications from more than 70 countries. And that also plays a role in terms of we build ecosystems that are sustainable. And we are serving as a hub, not only to, yes, there are neighboring markets that are that are blocking us, but there is a bigger market around us that we're serving. By default, trade with Turkey, with Kuwait, with Oman, with Iraq, with others have grown, and it will continue to grow. And if you ask me also about the blockade and the impact of blockade, I think just recently also there were some reports that Qatar is the most resilient in terms of economies in the region. And I think recently IMF have issued a report that Qatar economy is among the ones that are going to grow in 2021, 2022 by 2.5%, which in contrast with other economies around us. So this gives you, yes, we are blessed with natural resources. I mean, I will not sit here and pretend that the natural resource is not playing a big role in terms of our wealth. It is the main reason of our wealth. But we're also blessed with the right and wise leadership that have put that resource into good use by investing in educational system. We have one of the best educational system in the region and globally. We have a lot of amazing schools here in Qatar, and I think you personally have invested in this sector, and you've seen what Qatar Foundation is doing. And Qatar Foundation is among the top 10 globally nonprofit organizations. And the amount of universities from the West and the East that exist in Qatar, the amount of platform that we provide in terms of education, it's a big testimony to what we are doing in terms of building the human capital. Yes, there is a produced capital and there is a human capital that we're building to ensure that we can actually convert knowledge into producible services that we can do. By actually diversifying our economy and ensuring that we can provide value locally and internationally, this blockade did not stop us from growing. And if you go back into Qatar being the largest producer of LNG, not a single shipment had been missed since the blockade. So we've been always open for business, we always mean business, and we've always been committed to the delivery on our business promises. Again, back to the local SMEs and startups, I think that those local SMEs and those local startups have proven to be able to compete locally and internationally. Now, the challenge is how to ensure that we could actually make them more competitive globally, and how to ensure that these service providers and products that get manufactured locally can be able to compete internationally. Now, this is a country, it's a small economy at the end of the day. So how to convert products and services within such a small economy, the local domestic market is small, into being able to compete internationally. And we have good examples. So our financial sector is among the top performing sectors locally and regionally. Our air or transportation sector is among the best, and how to build on those successes, how to ensure that those national champions that exist within those sectors can actually take up with them those SMEs and those startups. You take a look at our media sector in Qatar. It's a thriving sector in the country. There's a lot of content development also, and that content development could be provided also by local SMEs and local startups. Back to your question, we've been able to provide the services and the products by small and medium enterprises and the private sector post-blockade. They've been able to compete internationally. They've been able to export their goods and services internationally. Yes, COVID is impacting everyone, and I don't think it's only Qatar. But also within COVID, I think that a lot of the small and medium enterprises and SMEs, since they've received the shock initially due to the blockade, they've been better built around how to sustain those shocks and how to actually go around them and become even stronger. What the role that we've played within the COVID impact, the COVID-19 impact, has been part of what the government have done. So once this blockade thing have happened, our government established, of course, there's a high-level crisis management committee, which have done an amazing job, both in the health-wise perspective and the economic-wise perspective. On the economic perspective, there has been an assignment of 75 billion Qatari riyals as a package to support the private sector and SMEs. Part of that was assigned for QDB to support the SMEs for their short-term requirements. And by that, I mean salaries and rents. We started with...
And was that, sorry to interrupt you, but was that also, whether it was expat owned or local owned, or did you make a distinction?
No, no distinction. It was both.
No distinction. Okay.
All the private sector companies in Doha. What have happened over there is basically we supported them for 6 months in terms of accessibility to funding through banks. So we provide 100% guarantee to their exposure to the local banks, and the local banks provide them with the funding for their salaries and rent. Our portfolio as QDB was actually extended for 6 months with no interest and no fees. That also had been then extended just quite recently, almost a month ago, until the 31st of December, where 2 billion more were added to the previous 3 billion. So now it's 5 billion in terms of support for those SMEs in terms of accessibility to the short-term requirement that they had. But we didn't stop there. Since we learned from the blockade, we established again a situation room. And in that situation room, we understand the importance of accessibility to information and training. So we've conducted north of 50-something training sessions online, virtual, for the SMEs and the startups. And basically it was around how to deal with the human resources, how to deal with the supply chains, how to make, especially companies that are within the medical sector, which was one of the most impacted. So we've supported them on the advisory aspect. Also, we approached COVID in a three-phased approach. So there is a survive, revive, and thrive type of an approach into it. And that survivability element, it was mainly focused around ensuring that they gain accessibility to funding and ensuring that they gain immediate accessibility to advice. So we created some sort of a hotline, and whenever an entrepreneur and SMEs would face a huge issue, we would almost certainly be there to help them and link them with the emergency committees to ensure that their issues get solved. Then the revive phase, which is basically reviving the packages in terms of ensuring that they receive the proper advice and the proper funding to ensure that they could be able to revive and go and just exit this drainage phase. The thrive phase is basically what we're going through currently on how to convert those issues into or those challenges into opportunities. And over there, I've seen amazing startups, especially in the technology arena, that are actually not only working now in Qatar, but they've expanded to different countries and they're providing services into different countries. We've matched that with our VC funding to ensure that they provide funding with no debt burden on their shoulders, so that they could be able to expand further. So as you could see, this blockade actually prepared us for other shocks. This COVID-19 situation, uh, the services that the government also have done among those 75 billion package or support didn't go only for QDB. There was a 50 billion that went into the central bank for a repo window for the banks to support the private sector. A big amount went into the electricity bills, and so this was waived actually for SMEs and startups and private sector. A similar amount went into the customs and others. So there was a big package support that was provided to the private sector to ensure their survivability and capability to go beyond the COVID-19.
So I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic, and just to pivot to that for a second, I'm curious how the pandemic has changed your outlook of sectors going forward that you will focus on, not only as QDB, but really as a country. Has it been altered in any way given the pandemic? And two is, I think like most Gulf economies, you're going to have this balancing act given the huge deficits during these periods of how to invest going forward. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is your economy is still very much driven by oil and gas and very much driven by government spending. So if the government pulls back, we've seen it over and over again that the economies tend to unfortunately decline because that diversification still hasn't happened. I guess my question is there a commitment to continue the investment program after all this, or do you see a bit of a slowdown in the foreseeable future?
I think I'm trying to be as frank as possible. Also, I think it would be unrealistic for anyone to assume that they will build on their areas of weakness and not on their areas of strength. And if you take a look at across the region here, I mean, the area of strength in this region have been mainly accessibility to hydrocarbon and the accessibility to wealth, to money. Human capital for us has been an area of strength. So it's basically how to capitalize on hydrocarbons and ensure that you're preserving the wealth also for the future generations, how to ensure that you're investing in the right way. And by investing in the right way, I mean making sure that your sovereign wealth funds and your reserves are actually strong enough to sustain shocks. At the same time, within an economy such as Qatar, which I've explained, it has quadrupled in terms of size in the last 20 years, we've created clusters and sectors that actually make sense in terms of squeezing for value now. It's time to sweat the assets. You've created great assets. It's just how to ensure that those assets would actually be able to create value locally and be able to create ventures that will be able to compete on an international level. Now that has been in the heart of our economic diversification planning mechanics. And we're doing this through a clustering approach, basically by understanding from the top down and bottom up type of an analysis, what are the clusters that make sense for us in Qatar to untap and to invest, double down on them and create and understand where the value pockets exist and how to expand from those value pockets. And I can't underestimate the role of the national champions. We've created in the last 20 years amazing national champions. It's how to capitalize on those national champions. And if you ask me about economic diversification, for me, and I think for Qatar, it stands on 5 main pillars. So it's how to grow non-hydrocarbon sectors and clusters and how to ensure that they will keep growing and that you will keep squeezing for value and sweat the assets. It's how to ensure that you will keep exporting non-hydrocarbon goods and services by advancing the competitiveness of our local economy and our local entrepreneurs and SMEs. So this is why exports is very essential for us in terms of our diversification efforts. The third element is how to ensure that there are revenues that are non-hydrocarbon for the government by making sure that we provide the right services that make sense for the private sector. The fourth element is how to reduce the leading role of the government. As you have rightfully mentioned, across the board, whenever governments start to take more of a relaxed seat, economies start to, and we've seen this in other economies where the private sector had the leading role. Once the pandemic have hit everyone, the government then went into becoming the leading player and the spender. So this gave GCC in a way or another actually more of a stable act because the governments were already in the driver's seats. I mean, it could be it's a curse, but in this situation by itself, it became a blessing because they were already at the forefront of that, on the leading in terms of economic activities. So the fifth element is how to ensure that the private sector can play a bigger role. And that basically by not competing with the private sector. We see that governments, I'm not talking here only about Qatar, but regionally, we see that in the Arab region, we talk about private sector, but you don't see in terms of implementation a lot of enhancement for the private sector to play the leading role. And in Qatar, we mean that by actually installing private sector mechanics to ensure that they will be leading the scene. And that by providing great infrastructure, policies, and ensuring that the legislation actually help them to be able to flourish and get bigger, ensuring that they obtain accessibility to credit, procurement opportunities, and others, and ensuring that there are no red tapes within. I mean, you could imagine also, Amjad, that this is an ongoing type of dynamic planning. There is an ongoing type of a dialogue between the government and the private sector and the society and academia on how to ensure that this is there's an overarching type of a strategy, which is our National Vision 2030. And one of those main pillars within our National Vision 2030 is economic diversification. So how can we, from economic diversification and economic development, build such economic diversification plans to untap those clusters and make sure that we have enough policies that are private sector friendly to ensure that the private sector can play the leading role?
You know, a couple of times I think we talked about the talent pipeline, and you mentioned industries that frankly cannot thrive or sustain without a very robust talent pipeline. One thing about Qatar that I think is not unique, but I think it's the percentage are even lower than other countries in the GCC, is that the local population is very small. And traditionally, you have not really given a path to citizenship or long-term residency in the country, which does have an impact because you effectively end up having is transient workers and people who don't really think long-term about establishing businesses in Qatar and growing them long-term. How do you see that going forward? Because to create a more sort of sustainable ecosystem, you need population and you need talent and you need people who are going to not only start businesses, but look at Qatar as a place where they can stay with these businesses and scale these businesses rather than moving them once they get bigger. How do you see that playing out going forward? And I think this is not only unique to you, but other economies in the region have to start seriously looking at this.
I think, Amjad, everyone within the region is looking at this as an area of an opportunity to actually attract talent. And talent is a global commodity now that everyone is competing for. So what offerings do we have in Qatar? And I think we are moving in terms of making sure that this is a welcoming environment for talent. If you take a look at recently, we've changed some laws in terms of ownership of real estate. We've changed some laws in terms of permanent residencies. Qatar is more welcoming in terms of expats to actually come here. And the kafala system has been removed. Now people don't have to obtain prior approval from the current sponsor to move to another sponsor when it comes to creating to job movement within the country. This is something that haven't happened in the neighboring countries also. So what we have done in Qatar from that perspective is to ensure that we're creating a labor market that's very friendly. We ensure that the lifestyle in Qatar is very welcoming. We ensure that some of the red tapes and some of the hindering issues have been removed, the likes of long-term ownership of real estate in the country. We know that we have areas of development which we're working on to ensure that, for example, the permanent residency scheme that we have in the country, which have been established almost a year and a half ago, and now it's going also under further development. So we understand that talent is an important element, and it's in the heart of our economic diversification plan. Now, accessibility to talent, when we have such an academic infrastructure in the country, also is easier for us than others because of Qatar Foundation and the great universities that we have here. There is an accessibility to a talent pool that's actually different. We have the likes of Carnegie Mellon, Texas A&M, Weill Cornell, George Washington University, and others, and Qatar University, and other educational systems that exist in the country that produce top talented individuals. And some of them are Qataris, some are not. And those are the first in terms of gaining opportunities to ensure that they could play a bigger role within the economy. And we're bidding on them because we've seen the fruits of such an educational system in the country. And we've seen how they play an amazing role in terms of creating new ventures and being able to set up companies here in Doha in the private sector and able to export their goods and their services internationally. We've touched upon this element of also cultural change in terms of going to the youth and trying as much as possible to plant the seed of entrepreneurship within the youth. And from ecosystem perspective, I think it was back in 2018, Qatar was ranked among the top globally by Global Entrepreneurship Monitor in terms of entrepreneurship ecosystem. And I think in their 2019 survey, we were also among the top 10 globally in terms of the intent of youth to start companies. And there were like equal numbers between males and females youth in terms of starting up companies in Qatar. So it's how to ensure that we plant that seed with them, how to ensure that this ecosystem exists and this educational system exists to make sure that it could produce the right talent, and how that right talent have enough economic activities to be able to exist, reside in Qatar and produce value, both for Qatar and international.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned females. We have a question from someone in the audience that I think is very relevant to this. So Chase Untermeyer has asked, what percentage of your entrepreneurs that you funded so far are women? And I would like to lead another question, which is, what are you doing specifically to advance not only women entrepreneurship, but women's participation in the economy?
So I actually don't have an exact number, but I know it's a lot. I would assume it's more than 30% of our portfolio. I interact a lot with most of the entrepreneurs and within the arena in terms of virtual community that we deal with, in terms of events locally. And I could tell you that they're very active. Both our Qatar Business Incubation Center, which used to be led by a female colleague of ours who actually moved now to Qatar Foundation. And I've seen over there how a lot of women participation have been done there. Same thing to Bidaya Center, also where I've seen a lot of female participation of startups that are started by Qatari females. And when I go to universities, when I talk to university students, a lot of the females are actually the ones who are more active in terms of wanting to start their own establishments or their own startups. In terms of what do we do for women, I think there has been a lot of initiatives locally. I've seen a lot of women empowerment initiatives, both from Qatar Foundation perspective, from participation within the economy, from Qatar Chamber and Commerce, and from the Women Business Association, which they are very active in terms of ensuring that women can gain accessibility to all the services. And to be quite frank, I don't see a huge difference between a male and a female when it comes to entrepreneurship. They both are gaining accessibility to all the services and the required support that they need. It's also from a cultural perspective that we've been seeing changes where it's actually female are playing a leading role in terms of leading organizations and leading startups in the country. So I think they've been very active. I've seen great success stories from female entrepreneurs and female startups, and we've seen how they're playing a leading role in a lot of the economic activities within Qatar.
Abdulaziz, another question from the audience, and this is something you and I tackled in a previous conversation, which I think is important to discuss, which is it comes from John Schmorhorn, and he's asking, how is Qatar tackling its food security? And what have you done to invest in agriculture projects in Qatar? And I know the blockade actually forced you into some of these positions, but it'd be great to hear what you did during the blockade, but then how are you tackling agriculture and food security at this stage?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, John, for the question also. So Qatar is ranked among the top when it comes to food security. And this hasn't been, this didn't happen haphazardly. It was actually planned for. And what our food security program is about is basically to ensure that we have accessibility through logistics, to ensure that we have the right logistical infrastructure and support, to ensure that it's very affordable for the consumers, and to ensure the quality. From Qatar development perspective, we've done that by enhancing the local production. And what we did is by the work with amazing friends and colleagues from Hassad and other food security programs locally, we've invested a lot in the technology. So the agritech is one of the main areas of focus, where a lot of technology is consumed, but also a lot of research is happening locally with the local research and development institutions. A lot of the farms in Doha are actually used for leisure. Once the blockade have happened, they've converted into being more productive farms locally. And we have harsh weather, Amjad and John and the listeners. I mean, it's not easy to actually produce crops here in Doha. So, but technology makes it easy, and having patient capital to ensure that we're actually building the right crops with the right quality. But that by itself and only is not the right solution. So what we've done is providing local production with subsidized funding to ensure that they will be able to compete, making sure that we link them with the right technology providers, providing the right logistical support, and building enough reserves locally to sustain shocks, build the right relationships between the local private sector and the international market. And we have an amazing team in Hassad. So, and Hassad basically, which means harvest in English. So Hassad as an organization have been doing an amazing job. They've been at the forefront of the food security element and how to support Qatar when it comes to food security. From policy perspective, the individual who's leading our food security program is the Minister of Municipality and Environment. And that program by itself have a very clear path in terms of capitalization and the usage of technology. At the same time, we're dry when it comes to water, so we need to be careful in the consumption of water to produce crops. So how to actually build that balance, which I think they've done an amazing job in that front. So as you could imagine, there are many levers and there are many moving targets when it comes to food security. having this centralized body to ensure that this planning and implementation is done in a systematic way, and ensuring that we have the right tools to do it, have made us able to sustain shocks and to build reserves for the future. Now we don't stop there. We have built incentive programs for investing within agritech and food hub. So we have those two programs that are agritech program to ensure that we can build startups and SMEs when it comes to agritech. And by agritech, I mean producing the technology itself, not only consuming the technology. And a food hub, we have one of the largest silos when it comes to logistics globally, which exists at Hamad Port, and how to build around that hub. And this goes back into the same notion of building around a core national champion with a periphery of small and medium enterprises to have this backward forward relationship with them. So I think it's the mix of all of these levers together.
And I think we'd be punished by our friends who love football if we don't mention the FIFA 2022 World Cup. Two questions there. I think one is that a lot of the infrastructure building has been driving the country, of course, forward, and that is starting to taper to some degree, given when the World Cup is happening. How do you see that this plays out into your future, especially for QDB, because you were involved, obviously, in a lot of the projects. But how do you see FIFA helping you going forward after 2022? What does it do for Qatar?
So, Amjad, I think it's economically known that all countries who have hosted big events have gone through something what they call an economic fatigue, and it's basically post this event what happens. And I think in Qatar we were privileged actually to have enough time to plan well, and I think you could see that. We're bidding and hosting more and more events to ensure that we could capitalize on the great infrastructure that we've created. We've been very mindful also to create, first of all, that World Cup itself, an amazing experience and something that's not forgettable, where this would help into building Qatar as a destination. At the same time, from SMEs and startups perspective, we've joined hands with the Supreme Council for Legacy and Aspire, which is a great facility here in the country, and Qatar Sport and Cultural Ministry to build sport acceleration, incubation and acceleration programs. And we are now in cohort 3 basically. So what we're doing is that, as you know, as His Highness have mentioned many times, and it's a notion that we're all following, that this is a cup for the Arab. And this is a World Cup that we want the Arab world to be proud of. So His Highness also inaugurated something that we call Challenge 22. And that was almost 3 or 4 years ago, where we've put challenges, the likes of fan zone and fan engagements and tracking of the football itself and all of these type of challenges in terms of the event to the Arab world entrepreneurs. And a lot of them came back with initiatives and startups projects. And now they got incubated and they gain accessibility to funding to convert those ideas into projects. The same notion have happened with those 3 cohorts, where we're incubating them and then we're accelerating their growth. We've opened up for the rest of the globe, not only the Arab region, where we're actually welcoming international ideas and startups who have technology that could be used to get incubated in Qatar, accelerated in Qatar, and could be used for the World Cup and beyond the World Cup. But this talks about a small scale startups. And I think your question was more around the broader economy. And within the broader economy, it's basically how to ensure, as I mentioned before, on how to sweat the assets, how to ensure that we have the right infrastructure in place, which we do, and the right mechanics in place for us to be able to produce goods and services to be able to compete internationally. And I go back into the notion of national champions and building around those national champions to be able to export goods and services internationally. For us, this World Cup creates a great platform to create an amazing experience, a great platform to have a good economic impact, a great platform to build a testimony that we can hold such events here. And also, don't underestimate the cultural and societal type of approach that this could bring into bringing the Arab together in terms of hosting such an event in Qatar. And this is an open invitation to all of you to actually attend it here, inshallah, in Doha in 2022.
Inshallah. Um, my last question centers around back to entrepreneurship because I know that's a big driver for you going forward to create new national champions coming out of Qatar. You hit on something that I fully agree with, which is one of our key issues is scale financing and growth capital. Um, for you to build an ecosystem within Qatar, specifically, what have you been doing to sort of spur the venture capital and private equity industry? And I think for you, it's not just about Qatar itself, but really creating a financial hub for the entire region. So what have you been doing, and how do you differentiate it from the DIFCs of the world, from the Abu Dhabi markets? How is it different?
I think, look, have we been trying? Yes. Are we successful? Not yet. And I think if you ask me, how are we trying to differentiate this? You look at the asset managers and the VCs. Why would they come to this region? And normally they would come for the government money. And this is something that we want to change a little bit. That they would come and they would exist for the entrepreneurs and the SME ecosystem that exists. And again, this goes back into us building an ecosystem that's, by the testimony of Global Entrepreneurship Monitor and others, that's among the best globally. But at the same time, that entrepreneurship ecosystem requires different elements. And one of the main elements, which I think still needs huge development, both in Qatar and regionally, is basically accessibility to funding through equity. What we have been doing is basically matching funding. So we've been inviting funds to come to Doha, and we match the funding that they provide. But we're doing this in a different way. So we're going into niche markets. For example, sport tech and sport technology. We go and we invite sport technology related venture capitalists to come and exist in Qatar, and we match the funding that they provide to be able to ensure that they create that market for Qatar to meet the notion of being the hub. I mean, this is the sport capital of the region. And this, for us, the existing of a sport technology VC is of immense importance. The same goes into fintech. So this launch of our fintech hub, this launch of our fintech incubation and acceleration programs, us matching and creating funds locally to ensure that those fintechs gain accessibility to funding, also goes into the same notion of ensuring that this actually makes sense, ensuring that those companies, those funds are here not only because we're funding them, they're here because there is a pipeline. And that pipeline actually could exist, flourish, and be able to access the bigger and the wider market internationally to ensure that they will be able to succeed and be able to access not only round A, but B, C, and D, and also go into IPOs hopefully soon.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I want to leave you with any parting words that you'd like to give to the audience.
Thank you, Amjad. I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks to the colleagues for the Atlantic Council for this great opportunity. Qatar has always been open for business. And for those who think of actually coming to the region or opening a business in the region, I highly advise them to visit the website of the Investment Promotion Agency, the IPA. We have amazing infrastructure. We have amazing port and international airport. And of course, Qatar Airways is among the top leading airlines globally. And the system here in Qatar does help and allow for foreigners to come, exist, for expatriates to own businesses here and flourish. It's an amazing country to exist at. and to start a business here in Doha. Our ecosystem helps entrepreneurs and startups. And I wish that I will welcome you, inshallah, and hopefully a lot of the attendees into 2022, into the World Cup here in Qatar, and expect amazing.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you, everyone. And please stay tuned for our next event on November 17th, where we'll have the co-founder and CEO of Careem, the largest startup built in the region and sold to Uber for $3.1 billion. We're excited to have that discussion. And please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.